Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and this is my summer 2019 anime watch list. This is everything I'm watching for the summer season of anime in 2019, and we're just going to get right into it. I bracketed this up as days of the week, and so this is everything I am watching. Starting us off with Sundays, we're watching 3 series on Sundays, the first being the ongoing and continuing Gegege no Kitaro, which I absolutely love and adore. If you're not already watching it, if you don't have any familiarity with it, I can't really help you. I just love it. It's been around for a little while now, and I love it to pieces. I look forward to it every Sunday, and so that's the first on my list. Coming in secondarily on Sundays is the Viking revenge epic Vinland Saga. It's this historical, and like the first 3 episodes all debuted around the same time, or at least I was able to watch them all at the same time. And then there's been like a gap for a few weeks until the 4th episode airs either later this week or next week as of the time of this recording. But I was really impressed with it. This the sort of historical setting, dealing with Vikings, and that whole revenge epic side of things. We've kind of left off the first 3 episodes where we're just getting to the reasoning for why it's going to become a revenge story, fathers and sons and things like that. And it's dope sauce. I love it. And so finishing us out for Sundays is the series Bem, which is actually based on a former Bem series, but it's not like directly related to it. You can watch this one without any familiarity of that former series, and it kind of reminds me of the series Agu Genius Dolls, which I believe I was talking about at one point on my channel. I remember having conversations back and forth speculating on the Agu series, and it's very much sort of supernatural, noirish. There's a lot of crime solving and dealing with murders and things like that. The 3 principal characters are these humanoids who can become monsters. And I don't know what exactly they are. Like, the faces that they have tie back to people who were once alive. They could choose their humanoid appearances and things like that. It's somewhat complicated, but it's kind of been like a murder mystery thing, at least as of the latest episode, where you delved into the secondary character, this girl, whose face seemed to be borrowed from a girl who was killed like 30 years previously or something like that, or 20 years ago. And it's interesting. The supernatural vibe, it's done in a way that actually I can palate really well, where I'm sort of iffy when it comes to supernatural anime, like vampire stuff and things like that. I don't really get into monsters and stuff. I don't find myself getting into it that often, but this one has so far done it in a palatable way for my personal taste, and I think it's interesting. So moving on from there, we're going on to Mondays, where I'm watching 4 series, and the first is the 2nd season, The Return of Skillful Teaser Takagi-san, which I absolutely fell in love with and adored the first season of. It's just a calm, heartwarming, joyful series that every time I start an episode, I just get an ear-to-ear grin, like a stupid oafish grin, and I'm smiling the whole way through, all the way up to the end credits. I just really enjoy watching it, and I'm so happy that it's back. And coming in secondarily on Mondays is the series Copcraft, which I can kind of relate to the aforementioned Bem in being this sort of, noirish, crime-solving kind of series. It's almost, but not quite, isekai-esque in that it's not talking about a character that was transported to another world, like a fantasy RPG kind of world or anything like that. More so in this series, there was a portal that opened where a fantasy, mythical, magical world sort of, erupted onto the Earth's doorstep. And now so many years later, there's this big city akin to New York or Chicago where, the cohabitation is these mythical, magical creatures, monsters, elves, fairies, and things like that. I think the elves in the series are called Semians or something like that. And it's very much about this police detective who, in the first episode, his partner is killed, murdered by like a monster or some human being who is being controlled by monsters and elves and things like that. And he is later then sidled up with this sort of lolly-esque, elfish girl who is very powerful, like a powerful warrior and also investigator. And she's there to get back this fairy that was stolen because the usage of these mystical, magical elements from this, fantasy sort of world that now actually exists connected to the Earth. There's this twisted perverting of those elements, creating drugs and weapons and things like that. that, and so there's a lot of illegal crime activity going back and forth between this fantastical world, which again now coexists with the Earth. And so this detective and this little elfish girl, they're solving crimes and chasing down this fairy that was stolen that has a sort of personal tie to the elfish girl and everything. And again, like Bem, it hit me in the right sort of way to be palatable, where I don't usually get into monsters-specific, supernatural anime series. And I've just been enjoying it for the first few episodes that have debuted thus far. Following on from there, third on Mondays is the series Arifureta, From Commonplace to World's Strongest. And this one is a thorough, through and through, isekai series. It's kind of Rising of the Shield Hero-esque, meets kind of sort of Angels of Death, where again, you're dealing with a protagonist who's becoming sort of overpowered, learning as he goes and powering himself up, and he is then sidled up with this very strange, lolly-esque little blonde girl who's also a vampire, but it's done in a palatable, enjoyable way from my personal taste. And so far it's interesting because it's kind of begun as a revenge story, because one of his classmates, his whole class, was transported to this, mystical, magical fantasy world, as all isekai tend to be. But he was then sort of, betrayed by one of his class members. One of the class members pointedly attacked him while they were coming under the attack of this monster, so as to get rid of him, whether because, there was a girl who liked him and this other guy was jealous. It remains unclear exactly what the motivation was to try to be rid of the main character. But he did not die. He has survived, and he has been building himself up, as I say, encountered this little blonde 300-year-old lolly girl and everything like that, vampire, and they're still climbing out of the dungeon, or trying to find a way out of the dungeon that they're trapped within as of like the third episode thus far. But I like it. I'm enjoying it, and that's all I can really say. And so rounding us off with the fourth and final series I'm watching on Mondays is Hensuki, Are You Willing to Fall for a Pervert If She's a Cutie? And this one you probably wouldn't assume that I'd be watching this, because while it is somewhat quintessential quintuplets-esque, which is, like a harem-esque kind of series, but it turns the idea of a harem on its ear a little bit, where the main character is not the pervert, the titular, hentai or pervert. It turns out the girls that seemingly have an interest in him are actually the perverts. And they are quite highly perverted. One wants to be dominated, the other one wants to be the dominator, and all this kind of stuff, and they've set their sights on him. But what really instigated the whole story moving along in the first place was, after cleaning up one of their classrooms or whatever, he finds a note professing love for him, as well as a girl's panties. And so they keep relating it back to sort of this perverted Cinderella thing, where he's trying to find the owner of the panties that were left behind, rather than the glass slipper, And it's just been pretty funny to watch, although I am somewhat fearful, because one of the characters that makes up the harem is his, little sister. And I really hope it's not going to be like a siscon, twisted, sickening thing where, she's interested in her brother or something like that, But it's already riding the rails of mild discomfort in how perverted some of these chicks are. And there's like a third chick that is sort of seemingly jealous of the first two, but I've seen some hints and whispers that she's into boys' love, and she thinks it's wrong that he should be even looking at girls to begin with. She'd rather him be with a guy or something. I don't know exactly. Very fetishistic is what I'm getting at for a harem. But it's done in a lighthearted, funny way. It's not sadistic or sick or twisted as of yet, as of how far I am into the series. If it gets that way, it's going to be an instant drop for me. As long as it stays sort of lighthearted and funny and approachable, I'll be sticking with it on Mondays. And so that brings us on to Tuesdays, where I'm watching 3 series. The ever-continuing, ever-ongoing Black Clover is the first on my list, which, again, if you haven't been watching, I can't really do anything for you, much akin to Gegege no Kitaro. It is what it is. I've been enjoying it, and that's all that matters. Coming in secondarily on Tuesdays is Magical Senpai, which is one that I really kind of had high hopes for when I saw the original PV for it, and I've already did a community feed post on YouTube where I talked about the fact that the main character kind of reminds me of Hotaru Shidare from Dagashi Kashi, only completely sort of polar opposite. Where Hotaru, she was very knowledgeable and very intelligent and, proficient in the history of dagashi or snacks, confectionery things that you would buy in like a candy shop or store. In this series, the titular magical senpai is completely inept and cannot seem to produce a solidified successful magic trick worth a damn to save her life. And so it's kind of been a little bit more on the meh side for me. I'm still watching it, but I thought it was going to be much funnier and much more approachable and enjoyable to watch than it's thus far turned out to be. But I'm watching it, so it's on the list. And then rounding us off on Tuesdays for the third and final series I'm watching on Tuesdays is A Girl Who Chants Love at the Bound of This World. I've talked about this one before. A lot of sort of time travel, dimensional travel stuff going on in it. The main character is heavily, heavily perverted, sort of in antithesis to the character in Henseki. This guy's out and out perverted, and he's very, shameless about making that apparent to everything that, is a female, gender in the series. But otherwise, dealing with the dimensional travel stuff and how he rewinds time occasionally, kind of like ReZero. It's interesting, and I'm still trying to figure out where it's going exactly. So as long as it's a mystery that I can engage with, I'm going to be continuing to watch it, probably through to its, fruition. And that'll bring us around to Wednesdays, where I'm watching 3 series as well. The first on my list being Astra Lost in Space, which I am actually currently reviewing weekly, doing weekly episodic discussion videos about, so I'm not really going to delve too deeply into it here, but I highly, highly recommend checking it out because there's a grand mystery that's ongoing, and it's just a really hot topic of conversation every week for me, and thoroughly invested in it and thoroughly enjoying it. And so coming secondarily on Wednesdays is How Heavy Are the Dumbbells You Lift? And this series is pretty funny. It's very much heavily revolving around muscle training and sort of informational aspects of diet and exercise, all that kind of stuff. And it's just been really funny and engaging to me. I like the animation style. I like the character designs. The main sort of, trainer dude, he looks like an average everyday Joe wearing a jogging suit, but then whenever he gets souped up wanting to talk about muscles and muscle training, he's like Lou Ferrigno on steroids, or Arnold Schwarzenegger who ate Lou Ferrigno, just so many muscles upon muscles. But it's really been somewhat charming, and it's interesting, like, listening to all the informational stuff that they talk about as far as what you want to, the outlook you want to have for weight loss or for muscle training, or emphasis on certain kinds of muscle training. And so, it's engaging, it's funny, I like it, I'm enjoying it. And thus far, it's on the list for that reason. And then rounding us off with the third and final series I'm watching on Wednesdays is Mao-sama Retry, which is another through and through absolute isekai series. It kind of reminds me of a mesh between How Not to Summon a Demon Lord and Sunday Without God, if you're familiar with that series. If not, it's once again a guy was transported into, an MMO RPG kind of world, and he's, of course, OP. He's the Demon Lord, and there are already factions who want to take him down while he's figuring out, his way, and he's already been sidled up with this little wayfish, lolly sort of girl, and, he's taking care of her now, and she was a slave. She was actually sent out from her town to be a sacrifice to a monster, and she's been very put upon, and they always, treated her poorly and everything like that. So the main character is the first one who ever took any sort of compassion for her and took her under his wing and everything like that. And then they ended up meeting, like, I don't know, one of the warrior girls of this world, who's like another young sort of lolicon, sort of thing. And it's just, I don't usually get into series like that with the overemphasis on the lolly things and all that kind of stuff. But I do like isekai most of the time. In fact, it's not even going to be the last isekai that I'm going to be talking about in this season that I'm watching. But I do tend to like isekais because it always, like, is a throwback, reminds me, makes me very nostalgic for when I used to play the Final Fantasies and Dragon Quests of old and things like that, and Dot Hack, you know, watching that anime and such like that. And so I've been enjoying it. It's lighthearted so far. It's somewhat humorous. And what more can you ask for? As long as you enjoy the experience of watching it, it should be on your list, and that's why that one's here. So that will bring us on officially to Thursdays, where I'm watching only 2 series, and both of these series are actually music-based, you know, kind of akin to my much-beloved, you know, Hibike Euphonium and things like that. We have Carol and Tuesday, which is continuing and ongoing, which is just miraculous. I absolutely love and adore this series. All of the characters, most notably all of the music from the creator of Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo and all that kind of stuff, you know, Shinichiro Watanabe. And it's just been really awesome. The latest episode revolved around a revelation to do with Carol's father. You know, she was sort of estranged from her parents, orphaned, if you will, and found herself on Mars in the distant future. You know, this is a sort of a not too distant future thing where Mars has been, you know, inhabited for quite a while, kind of like in Cowboy Bebop. And there's even Woolongs, you know, the currency from Cowboy Bebop and like Space Dandy and things like that, because of the hand Shinichiro Watanabe has had in those multiple series. But she actually gets reintroduced to her father, having suspected for quite some time that, you know, her parents were probably dead and gone and buried, and she would never know them. And it was a really heartening revelation. You could see it coming from a mile away, I'll be honest. But I love Carol and Tuesday. I absolutely love, and adore that series. I'm subscribed to the official Carol and Tuesday YouTube channel, where they continue to, you know, debut these videos, behind-the-scenes videos, showing the performers doing the singing of the songs, and you can tell how they rotoscoped and animated over their performances and things like that. And it's really just an awesome look behind the scenes, behind the curtain, to what is otherwise just this miraculous, beautiful, amazing series. I absolutely love and adore. It was definitely the closest I got to top tier favorite of the previous season. You know, everything I was watching as far as being my #1 favorite above all else. And then following on from there, rounding us out for Thursdays, is the series Given, which I've heard tentatively described as a boys' love series. Although I'm not really seeing that, I'm not really getting that vibe, at least as of yet. But it's very much about this sort of fledgling rock band and this sort of simpleton character who has an interest in learning guitar for reasons that are as yet unknown. But he sidles up to sort of the main character who's in this fledgling rock band. They're practicing after school every day. Sometimes he skips out you know, study hall or whatever, and he goes and he plays with his buddies. And this character, we just found out in the latest episode that this character has a beautiful melodic singing voice, this sort of simpleton character. I haven't learned all the names yet. But, you know, the main character who was teaching him tentatively to play guitar per his request is now astounded because, hey, this guy can sing. He immediately, as soon as he hears him singing, is like, you want to join our band? Whereas he was only sort of, you know, tepidly teaching him to play guitar. And usually, you know, when it comes to music and stuff like that, series like Piano no Mori, again, Hibike Euphonium, and Your Lie in April, things like that, I always tend to like music series, you know, series based around music, the playing of music, whether it be classical, like Classicaloid, which I covered every single episode of, the 2 seasons of that show, or rock or whatever like that, you know, jazz, in the case of Kids on the Slope. I tend to really enjoy these series about music, and so I'm definitely invested in this one. I want to see where it's going to go and if they can get their band sort of up and going, and how this simpleton-natured character is going to play into that, whether he's actually going to become sort of more knowledgeable as they go on, you know, that kind of thing. And so that'll bring us around to Fridays, where I'm watching the most series on a given day out of the week, with 5, the first on the list being the 2nd season of Dan Machi, which I am currently reviewing episodically. At least I've covered the first 2 episodes. I'm probably just going to cover it all the way through to episode 12 or whatever the final episode of the 2nd season is going to be, because I just love and adore this series. I love and adore the characters, and I'm just so happy it's back, much akin to the aforementioned skillful teaser Takagi-san. And it's just awesome sauce. I love it. I'm glad it's back. Coming in secondarily on Fridays is the series Dr. Stone, which is quite an intriguing premise, at least for my money. It almost seems like a classical 90s anime, something that would have been out in the 90s, sort of around the time Cowboy Bebop came out, late 90s, early 2000s, things like that, where apparently there was this travesty per the hands of mankind where an explosion happened or something like that, some sort of chemical reaction or something that turned everyone in the world to stone. But it's more so like they were put into stasis, like people are still alive inside these stone sort of protective coverings. And 3,000 years later, the titular Dr. Stone, I guess, wakes up out of it, and then his buddy wakes up out of it. The buddy was confessing his love for this girl in their school, and he's subsequently found her. And there's this really heavy emphasis on science versus sort of the mystical, magical, sort of isekai framework, because it's not an isekai. It's supposed to be the future of the earth and of mankind. And the titular character, he's, very much proficient in the sciences, and so he figures out a way to break people free from these stone sort of housings that they're contained within. But in doing so, they've actually seemingly, air quotes, woken up a villain character, this sort of very, muscular but very intellectual character who is very down on adults and things like that. So whereas the main character wants to save the world using science to bring all humanity back from this stone encasement that they've all been trapped within, this other character's like, well, we'll bring back all the kids, the unencumbered youths, the unperverted, people who wouldn't want to reign high and think about ruling and being the leaders of the world and all that kind of stuff, selfish and egotistical. It's more about, for him, the youth of humanity, the puerile youth. And so it is quite fascinating, because there is a lot of application of scientific things in the descriptions of, whether it's weapon making or building a shack to live in this otherwise sort of apocalyptic, nature overrun future and everything like that. And it's just really engaging. It's really awesome. And it's like one of the big surprises for the season for me. And it's real classic anime tone, but it also has a lot of modern ideas with how proficient the main character is in the sciences and how he bounds off this threatening character and everything like that. So I dig it. I mad dig it. And the same could be said for the third series that I'm watching on Fridays, Enen no Shobutai, or Fire Force, which is another series that feels like a thorough throwback, very much dealing with the sort of a fire force, a fire brigade or firehouse, but for the purposes of this story, this very sci-fi-esque story, people are spontaneously combusting and becoming these monsters, these sort of fireborn monsters. There's this whole sort of emphasis on, pyrokinetic powers and things like that. And some of the actual firefighters, they have fire manipulation capabilities and things like that. And so they're trying to silence these monsters before they run amok. These average human beings who just sort of spontaneously combust and sure enough become these fire creatures. And so you're following around this fire brigade that's trying to put out the fires, but it's the fires within the contaminated souls of these other human beings. And it's just really, really awesome. The visuals, the animation style, the character designs, it's just so investing and another thorough surprise in the summer 2019 season for me. And coming in at number 4 on Fridays is the series, I'm probably going to butcher this title just as a forewarning, but I have it written as Araburu Kisetsu no Otome Domo Yo, which is this sort of coming-of-age story revolving around a literary club of girls in school who are sort of, they're at that age where they're interested in learning more and trying to understand what exactly sex is and that how it affects the boys in their class, how it affects their own lives, the people in the class surrounding them and everything like that, their peers. They all kind of have levels of feeling like they're outcast, and their little literary group is sort of their safe haven. but it's very much dealing with, again, sort of, it's a coming of age story where they're just trying to figure out their place in the world, their place revolving around sex and how that impacts their lives, the lives of their friends, and even in one case a teacher, which is a little questionable. So I'm kind of watching it. I'm not fully invested in it. I'm kind of watching it just as a curiosity, because I'm like, what the hell is this series? What's going to be happening in it? I don't quite get it. I can't quite wrap my mind around it, because it's not quite straightforward, I guess you could say. It has complicated levels, and it's interesting while also being sort of an enigma that I can't quite wrap my head around. But that'll bring us on to the fifth and final series I'm watching on Fridays, and that is Okasan Online, which is a isekai with mommy issues. And I love and adore it thus far, even though it did get a little pervy via the latest episode, which I was afraid it was going to do. I don't like that aspect of like the mother and son getting too familiar in this MMORPG kind of world. But it's basically about, trying to get parents and children together, trying to get them to understand each other better and have more of an open, relationship with them and a rapport with them. And in this case, it's by sending a kid and his mom into this fantasy MMORPG sort of framework, game framework kind of thing. Whereas, while it seems like they're inhabiting a whole new fantasy RPG sort of world, it is actually still supposed to be a game. So there are game mechanics and things like that that come into play. It's not an actual fantasy world or anything like that. But I like the mother character, and it's just cute and funny. But again, it's sort of riding the rails as of the latest episode, getting just a little too close for comfort into areas that are a little perverted where it comes to the relationship dynamic between the mother and son, inadvertently though it may have been. And I hope it doesn't keep banging on the head that notion, as it unfolds, as it continues to unfold. And so that'll bring us on to the final day of the week, Saturday, where I'm only watching one series, and that is the ever-continuing, ongoing Demon Slayer, which I frickin' love. I'm so glad I decided to jump into this series. I've been enjoying it from the get-go. It's about this character whose family was slaughtered by demons, all except for his younger sister, who is transformed into a demon, but not full force. And the bond, the familial bond between them, exists so strongly that she's not given over to becoming a demon. She's not trying to eat and attack him. And so he's trying to save her life. He's trying to find the demon that sort of in the lore of vampirism and things like that. You always try to find the chief vampire who turned your sibling or your friend into a vampire, kill that vampire, and then your friend or sibling returns to normal kind of scenario. The main character believes, Tanjiro believes he can do this if he finds the demon that turned his sister. And you've got a couple of other really kooky, hilarious characters. I just enjoy the ever-loving hell out of it. It's one of my favorite series that I'm watching, quite frankly. And so that's pretty much it. That's everything I'm watching for the summer 2019 season of anime. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below, what you're watching, what you're not watching, if any of these things sound interesting to you, all that good stuff, as always, in the comments below. And so yeah, otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.